Episode 60, March 24th, 1915. At the Crack of Dawn, Air Reading Before Breakfast, by Flight Lieutenant Harold Rosher, RNAS. Read by Alex Thompson. Some of the most moving documents in the literature of the war were the simple, unstudied letters written home by officers and men who day after day were facing the imminent threat of death. Flight Lieutenant Harold Rosher was in the Naval branch of the Air Service. He was killed on February 27, 1916, when testing a machine at Dover. Earlier in the war, he had taken part in several daring raids on German bases. It is fitting that a letter to his parents, written on March 24, 1915, should be reproduced in the precise words in which he wrote it, a tribute to a most gallant airman. The editor of his war letters added to Mr. Rosher's own very modest account the official bulletins which were published at the time. Number 1 Squadron, RNAS, BEF, March 24th, 1915. Dearest Mum and Dad, another successful little jaunt. 5 of us were chosen to go. Captain Courtney, Meats, who travelled up to town from Dover in the train with Dad, self, and 2 subs named Andre and Huskisson. Courtney and I got there and back. Meats came down in Holland with engine trouble and is interned. Andre lost his way in the clouds and fog and came back. Huskisson did the same, only dropped his bombs on Ostend on the way. Our mark, by the way, was the submarine base at Hoboken, near Antwerp. Yesterday morning we were to have gone, but the weather was not good enough, and last night we slept at the aerodrome so as to get off at the crack of dawn. This morning we got up about 3:30 a.m. Thank goodness the weather was warm, and breakfast followed. It's mighty hard to get down eggs and bread and butter at that hour. We cut for the order of starting, but decided to keep as near one another as possible. I went off last but one, at 5:30 a.m, and streaked out straight across the sea. We were pretty heavily loaded, and my bus wouldn't climb much. I saw one machine ahead of me, but lost it almost immediately in the clouds, which were very low, 2,500 feet, and it was also very misty. Our course was right up the coast, past Zeebrugge, and then cut in across the land. At the mouth of the Scheldt, I got clear of some of the clouds and saw Courtney behind me and 2,000 feet above me, my machine then being about 5,000 feet only. He rapidly overtook me. We were all on Avros, but his was faster. Unfortunately, over Antwerp, there were no clouds. Courtney was about 5 or 6 minutes in front of me, and I saw him volplane out of sight. I had to go on some little way before I spotted the yards myself. I next saw Courtney very low down, flying away to the coast with shrapnel bursting around him. He came down to under 500 feet and, being first there, dropped his bombs before he was fired on. As the wind was dead against me, I decided to come round in a semicircle to cross the yards with the wind so as to attain a greater speed. I was only 5,500 feet up, and they opened fire on me with shrapnel as soon as I got within range. It began getting a bit hot, so before I got quite round, I shut off my petrol and came down with a steep volplane until I was 2,500 feet, when I turned on my petrol again and continued my descent at a rate of well over 100 miles an hour. I passed over the yards at about 1,000 feet only, and loosed all my bombs over the place. The whole way down I was under fire. 2 anti-aircraft guns in the yard, guns from the forts on either side, rifle fire, mitrailleurs or machine guns, and most weird of all, great bunches, 15 to 20, of what looked like green rockets, but I think they were flaming bullets. The excitement of the moment was terrific. I've never travelled so fast before in my life. My chief impressions were the great speed, the flaming bullets streaking by, the incessant rattle of the machine gun and rifle fire, and 1 or 2 shells bursting close by, knocking my machine all sideways and pretty nearly deafening me. On my return, I found my machine was only hit twice. Rather wonderful. One bullet hole through the tail and a piece of shrapnel buried in the main spar of one wing. I've now got it out. I found myself across the yards and felt a mild sort of surprise. My eyes must have been sticking out of my head like a shrimp's. I now was gasping for breath and crouching down in the fuselage, body of the machine. I was, however, by no means clear, for shrapnel was still bursting around me. I jammed the rudder first one way and then the other. I banked first onto one wingtip and then onto the other, now slipping outwards and now up and now down. I was literally hedged in by forts, and only 1,000 feet up, and had to run the gauntlet before getting away. I was under rifle fire right up to the frontier, and even then the Dutch potted me. My return journey was trying. Most of the time I had to fly to under 500 feet, as I ran into thick clouds and mist. I pottered gaily right over Flushing, and within a few hundred yards of a Dutch cruiser and 2 torpedo boats. I got back home about a quarter of an hour after Courtney, having been very nearly 4 hours in the air and having covered, I suppose, getting on for 250 miles. I've not yet heard what damage was done. The CO was awfully braced. I had some breakfast when I got back, wrote out my report, had lunch, and then a very, very hot bath. Tomorrow I'm going out with Courtney to see the war, as we've been given the day off to do as we please. My engine gave me several anxious moments. For some reason, it cut right out over the Ch8, and I had actually given up all hope when it picked up again. It was pretty risky work flying several miles out to sea, only just inside of land too, but our surprise, or I should say Courtney's, of the Germans was certainly complete. Must really stop now. Ever your loving son, Harold. Postscript. The following is the Admiralty's official account of the Antwerp raid. The Secretary of the Admiralty yesterday afternoon, March 24th, 1915, issued the following communication from Wing Commander Longmore. I have to report that a successful air attack was carried out this morning by 5 machines of the Dunkirk Squadron on the German submarines being constructed at Hoboken near Antwerp. 2 of the pilots had to return owing to thick weather, but Squadron Commander Ivor T. Courtney and Flight Lieutenant H. Rosher reached their objective and after planing down to 1,000 feet dropped 4 bombs each on the submarines. It is believed that considerable damage has been done to both the works and to submarines. The works were observed to be on fire. In all, 5 submarines were observed on the slip. Flight Lieutenant B. Crossley Meets was obliged by engine trouble to descend in Holland. Owing to the mist, the 2 pilots experienced considerable difficulty in finding their way and were subjected to a heavy gunfire while delivering their attack. The French official communiqué gave precise details thus. At Hoboken, the Antwerp shipbuilding yard was set on fire and 2 submarines were destroyed while a 3rd was damaged. 40 German workmen were killed and 62 wounded.
Upon his shoulder, the right hand again, as control.